What do you think are some of the key requirements of successfully managing large and complex programs?
There are lots of things you need to keep in mind. There are probably three that are really most important. The first is to have a really clear understanding, both with government and the donor, as to what the program's trying to achieve and what success will look like. So it's really important to spend a bit of time creating that vision around the objectives of the program, and also to keep that in mind during the delivery of the program, which could run for 4 or 5 years. The second one I would emphasize is to build a really strong relationship, both with government, the people that you're working with day to day, but also the donor who's funding the program. I suppose the third thing I'd emphasize is the importance of government ownership, particularly on a large reform program. And how about yourself, Mujib? You've been working on SNG for a long time. What do you think the particular challenges were that we faced?
It's about understanding the nature of the problem. You need to engage with the client and understand from the stakeholders themselves what is the problem. The other is the importance of the evidence. So for instance, in the SNG, we went about experimenting with 2-3 different ways of collecting the evidence. We undertook surveys in the case of education and what the needs were in particular districts, and then we tried a different model in the health sector. The other challenge was the difference between the two provinces. I mean, they are completely different provinces, moving in completely opposite directions by way of reforms that were unfolding in the two provinces. So while Punjab was re-centralizing authority, KP was massively decentralizing authority, and that was a tricky thing for a program like SNG to manage.
And in practice, how did the team manage those differences between the two programs?
This essentially meant giving the two teams a lot of autonomy. So the two provinces were allowed to move at their own pace, and that also meant that the teams didn't need to go from a centralized blueprint approach. They needed to engage with their counterparts in KP and Punjab. For instance, Punjab, the focus was more on supporting the finance department, where there was greater opportunity for reform to take place. So we paced it accordingly.
I mean, we spent probably the first half of the program, so the first 2 years or so, really trying to push financial reform, and then everything changed when we had the new minister.
Initially, we went ahead, engaged with the government, because government at least nominally agreed that they needed a public financial management reform strategy, but it was only a technical exercise which didn't have much ownership within the government. But as part of that process, the team not just met the technical counterparts, they went and met the political advisor to the Chief Minister. And it just so happened that while it appeared as if the reform almost was about to die down on this stream, it suddenly the advisor became the finance minister. So that was the opportunity when the team struck and provided support to some of our own pet projects. And that is what got the things going. And the minister then herself took the lead, took it to the Chief Minister, and there was this then government-wide ownership. And that led to immense changes.
You need to be able to get into a position quite soon where you have a sort of trusted advisor relationship with the key secretaries that you're working with. The programme may have some objectives that are quite long-term. You know, the secretary's got issues of the day that they need to resolve. And I've always focused in the mobilisation of a large programme in just building that relationship with the key people in government.
We deliberately constructed a very elaborate M&E strategy, which tried to visualise how the programme would unfold and what the information requirements of various stakeholders be, both within the programme and within DFID and within government. The M&E and learning function fed back not just into the design of the program, but also into the implementation.
During the second half of the programme, there was quite a lot of focus on value for money assessments as well, and I think our methodology on that moved. We learned quite a lot from applying VFM thinking on SNG. I think it'll be useful to talk a little bit about how you ensure government ownership. And one of the things we did on SNG, which was actually something we learnt from the programme before, is to set up reform working groups within government. So these are the teams that actually do the work, and the consultant team provides strategic direction and provides technical support, but the actual doing of the work happens within government, and that's really important for longer term sustainability.
I think that is of critical importance. In fact, it's the SNG's engagement with the government was critical, and it was maintained at multiple levels, right from the steering committee down to the district level. The government saw things are being provided solution to, which were felt by the government to be the problems. One example, for instance, of that is a shift from the challenge fund rounds, first and the second round. The first round was delivered by the non-government actors. It was a pretty solid, good rounds. But the second round, government thought, that they needed to be involved more and be in the driving seat. And that is why the program changed. And government agencies and the district governments themselves applied for that. And those interventions, which were extremely innovative, turned out to be the most sustaining, and eventually were scaled up by the government in both provinces.
And the key thing there was that the direction, the ideas came from district officers who at first hand
Absolutely
witnessed what the problems were.
How did we make various reforms sustain? Did we did we interlock them, with
No,
the
I mean,
wider
that's
system of
really,
reforms?
really important. It's something that you increasingly focus on in the second half of the programme. And the beauty on SNG is that there are multiple work streams. And what we were able to do was to ensure that the various work streams interlinked, so that it would be very difficult to unravel one particular work stream without it having implications for other reforms that had already been accepted and were adopted. And I liken it when I'm talking with the team about creating the new normal. We're doing a lot of work around the budget cycle, which is an annual cycle. So each year we were able to deepen and strengthen the reforms. And it just becomes the way of doing business. The reform that we're doing around the budget process also links into policy processes elsewhere, where we've also delivered reform.
It also created the need for reforms to sustain, for instance, the support to the creation of specialized units in the finance department. And so the government had a tax policy unit, and eventually they realized for every year, they needed to come up with a fiscal framework to guide their budget making over the next few years. So the tax unit became their requirements. They couldn't work without that. All of that has led to SNG program delivering significant impact. Two particular examples that come to that I can immediately quote are support to the Provincial Finance Commission awards. There was need for a system which would predictably tell the district governments and the governments below them what is the share of resources from the province that they'll get. So this was an exercise where, based on evidence, their needs and requirements were calculated. This was the first time when a lot of the relevant evidence was actually collected and presented as one of the credible building blocks of a PFC system. So this is something that is now in place in both provinces, and has actually changed the nature of the dialogue within government, how resources are to be distributed. And hopefully it will start affecting the wider conversation about the resource distribution within government and allocation of resource.
And what sort of other impacts do you think are worth talking about on SNG?
One important reform that I recall is the expenditure tracking at the district level. So this essentially was a kind of a black box, because the system within Pakistan could only track down the information about the budget and expenditure down to the level of a DDO. DDO is a drawing and dispersing officer. And typically in health and education, for instance, it will be the district officer responsible for about 1,000 schools or about 60 to 80 health facilities. And typically what would happen is that the staff would be reallocated from remote areas to the closer, more convenient. So the remote health facilities wouldn't be manned at all. Similarly, the medicines would be procured centrally, but given to them and not to the others. So the contribution of the SNG here was that the SNG helped them track the expenditure down to the level of the facility.
So it actually meant that resources were delivered at the points of service delivery.
Government has now taken this to other departments. Education is one, but more importantly it's gone to police, which is traditionally a very conservative department.
So this is focusing very much on delivering resources to service units, but we also worked at the revenue end, at the top end, particularly in Punjab, where we were able significantly to increase revenue receipts.
In the case of Punjab, the SNG program supported a large survey. Survey in an area which has been extremely complex in the past. For instance, in the earlier governments, when the military government was there, they tried to undertake surveys of the taxpayers, and that was resisted throughout the country. SNG managed it skillfully and was able to actually undertake a province-wide survey and they registered 25,000 new taxpayers, institutional corporate taxpayers.
Businesses.
These are small and medium-sized businesses. Has already started leading to significant improvement in the GST collection
revenue. Yeah. I think the team are the most important aspect of the project. They need to understand what the project is doing, but they need to be able to temper that with knowledge of what is possible and what isn't possible. For OPM, in terms of managing the team, we give strong direction in terms of these are the outcomes we want the project to deliver, but we rely on you, the team, to navigate how we deliver them. And we rely on their local knowledge, their political awareness, to move us to a place where we're able to deliver these outcomes. The team, without the team we had on SNG, we would not have delivered the results.